Hey y'all, so in today's video I'm going to be talking about a very big topic that comes up a lot, I get a lot of comments on, and that's hair color correction. Specifically the use of a hair color remover and different tricks and tips and whatnot. So I just want to start off by saying that no two people are going to have the same situation with a color correction. Okay, a color correction is kind of like a snowflake. Every single one is different. There's different avenues you're going to take. Sometimes you have multiple options. Depends on what you have in your salon already or styling area. So I have a little bit of notes here I just want to share with y'all that I talk to my different classes about, and when we cover the color correction unit, I usually make it a week or two, and then I try to do a really fun situation where I'll take a series of mannequins, I'll purposely mess up the mannequins, or I'll give them a color and I'll say, okay, your client wants this, what are you gonna do? And I'm looking at making sure they're gonna be doing the correct things, the correct steps, the consultation. So one of the biggest issues with the color correction where everyone messes up is they don't know where you are. Okay, the 4 steps of formulation, if you've taken Cosign's class, you know that. It's actually in the book, and My Lady has the 4 steps as well as pivot point. The problem is that students don't read, and teachers don't always teach the correct theory. So you want to make sure you know where you're at. Does a client have natural hair? How much natural hair do they have? What do they have in their hair? This is a big issue. What I've kind of narrowed it down to is that when I'm doing a consultation and I don't know what the person has, I ask them, what have you used? Do you maybe have the box? Do you have a photo of what you used? I've had people tell me they've used, oh, it's not hair color, and then I find out later it is hair color. They've just used ammonia-free because they think that's not a chemical, or they've really used a high lift blonde instead of a regular hair color shade, and that can impact porosity. All of those things matter. And what you're doing at this stage is you want to get an idea of what's been done, and then you're going to start thinking in your head, okay, can I do certain things? The next step is, what is the goal? Okay, where are you gonna go? If a client comes in, she's been using box black hair dye over and over and over again and overlapping and overlapping. What's gonna happen is up here is gonna be less colored as opposed to the mid shaft and ends, which are gonna have buildup upon buildup upon buildup of pigment, making it very difficult to work with. And if you have that kind of client and she pulls out a photograph of Marilyn Monroe and says, I want this and it's gonna be my way or the highway, well, you wanna give her the highway because there's nothing you're gonna be able to do in that session, ideally. So, the next step is you want to know what tools do you have. Not every salon has a color remover. There's been stylists that have been doing hair for years and they still don't know what a color remover does. And the sad thing is people don't get taught in school the different types of removers that are there. There's 2 kinds of removers that you're gonna have. There is the perm-like hair color remover, and there is the bleach-like color remover, which is pretty much bleach, it's just a little bit different. I'll teach you all a fun marketing technique. One of the color removers I have that is a bleach-like one, it's from Beyond the Zone. It is the Radical Color Remover, and it's ammonia-free. Bad idea to use this, especially if you have a client with box black hair dye. You're not gonna get a really good result. You're probably gonna get a screaming orange head. All they did was they took out the ammonium persulfate because bleach is 3 kinds of bleaching salts. Ammonium persulfate, which is a nasty smell, potassium persulfate, and sodium persulfate. If you take out the ammonium persulfate, you're left with a very weak bleach. This may work for semi-permanent colors, which is direct dye, because it just creates that nice alkaline environment, but it may not also work. So that's where you really got to be cautious with when using products like this. Just wanted to throw that out there as we go along. Please replay this, get exposed to it a few different times. That way you are familiar with the information. Another important thing, if you suspect the client is lying, always have the client sign a waiver, but even though you have the client sign a waiver, don't always rely on that. What you want to get in the habit of doing is do a strand test and explain to the client, this is part of my procedure. Make sure the client's hair is completely clean. A lot of the times when people are working with dirty, dry hair that has a layer of hairspray on it and muck, number one, you're not going to get a good result of finding out what they're really like, and you're also potentially going to cause a reaction. So that's an important step to be mindful of when you are dealing with that. So your 2 color removers, perm-like and bleach-like. Perm-like color removers. Usually it's 2 components. Well, actually it really is always 2 components. I've yet to find one that was a single use one. I think maybe Clairol had one, but I'm blanking on the name. There's part 1 and part 2, and both smell equally as horrible. Most favorite one that people loved was Pravana, but I got news for y'all. A lot of them come out of the same factory. It's just got a different, fancier label on it, and you might get more product and the shampoo that comes with it. You mix the 2 products, it's a timed reaction, you whisk it up, and you apply it to clean, slightly damp hair. That way you will not be wasting as much product, and you get even penetration, and the porosity is all even. The benefit of using the perm-like hair color remover. It does not lift natural hair at all, so let's say you get some on the scalp, no worries, it's gentle, it's not gonna give them a burn, it's not gonna affect your natural hair color. It only targets and removes artificial oxidative color. Bringing me to my next point. If your client is coming in because of a buildup of purple shampoo, or she's got semi-permanent color in her hair or direct dye, this is not gonna be the color remover for you, because if you try to take that and you put that on hair that's been treated with pre-oxidized color like direct dye, you're gonna get a horrible reaction. It's gonna show all kinds of different shades of an ugly rainbow is what I call it, because what happens is it starts to eat away at those big, already oxidized color molecules that are sitting on the surface of the hair, and I've had people go from blue to like a horrible brown to just a weird, unpredictable color, and it even says that on the label. So please don't risk that, don't do that. If you're ever caught in a situation where the client has a mix of artificial oxidative color and direct dye, use the bleach-like one because you can't go wrong there. The other downside to using the perm-like one is that it smells. It smells really bad. It's usually a sulfite, sulfur-based. So when you are mixing that, that smells kind of like a gas leak. And a fun story, at my previous class I was working with, that one building had a history of gas leaks. I was not aware of that. I didn't give them a heads up that, hey, this product smells really bad. So we mixed the product, it stunk the room up to all high heavens, and then as that odor of the product kind of spread, the front desk got word of it and they automatically thought, oh, gas leak, and they went absolutely crazy. We actually had the head of the school come in and was like almost panicking, and I'm like, oh, it's just a stinky product. So that was a fun little day right there. Another good thing, so this is a pro with them, is that they are gentle, like I said before, but the downside is it really depends on how many applications you're doing. Typically on a good day, you're able to do 2 applications, which is great. This is ideal for that client that's been using a ton of box black or dark brown hair color and it's been overlap and overlap. You're able to get as much of it out. And how this product works is that it's, you've already shampooed and cleaned the hair. It's gonna go in there and it tells those molecules that are swollen to shrink. This is reducing them. So if you think back to basic chemistry, this is a reducing agent. This is gonna reduce something that's big and oxidized and make it small again. And ideally, you're gonna use warm water. You never wanna use cold water. You're gonna get all those molecules out of the hair. You're gonna use a higher pH shampoo because typically what you wanna do is, keep that cuticle open, keep the pH high, keep it washing out. If y'all remember the lesson on pH, I mentioned how high pH shampoo can strip hair color. It's actually shocking to find out that a lot of professional shampoos that will say color safe, they'll contain sodium chloride, which is table salt. I've used that on hair that was compromised instead of using a very high pH shampoo of like a pH of 9 or 10 as to not further compromise the hair. I've used those and it worked just fine, and it was able to strip out enough of it. It's the shampoo that's really gonna be the damaging factor. Like I know people will use Color Oops and they'll complain about, oh, my hair felt horrible after. Then I always ask, well, did you deep condition? There's a whole system. You always wanna clarify the hair, shampoo the hair, apply the product, process the product, rinse the product, shampoo it the times it tells you to, do a deep conditioning treatment, condition it, and then you wanna figure out, do I have to recolor? The other benefit with this is that it also, you can recolor in the same day. Typically, you're going to be using a lower volume developer, typically 10 volume. A lot of the box colors say use a demi, box color removers say use a demi permanent color. I really don't believe in that. If you just use 10 volume, it works just fine. You get a longer lasting result. But the important key to think about is that because you've done so much to the hair already and that hair has been treated before, it's going to be more porous. So you typically want to use a slightly warmer shade. I know that sounds crazy, but that is because if the hair is porous, it's going to reject the warm and grab very cool. So even though you're thinking you're using a good shade, if that shade is way too cool, you're going to end up with a really off-tone result, and then you're kind of in a mess again. So again, be mindful of that. Some of the Color removers will contain a, I'm sorry if I'm saying a lot, a reoxidizing agent or a checker, so that's usually peroxide. They'll give you some small peroxide, you're gonna put it through. And what you're looking for is that this is where it's ideal for that client that's been using buildup upon buildup upon buildup of box black hair color. And that is because if you have that client and it looks like you've gotten all the color out, what happens is inside the hair, all those color molecules shrink, so it looks like, oh, she's back to blonde again. You gotta put that blonde hair color all over, and then all of a sudden you'll see the client's eyes go like this, and then your eyes go like that, because what's happening is you're seeing that this is lightening here where she's all virgin, but the rest of it is turning black again, and you're like, what happened? Is this some kind of magic? Is there a ghost in the salon? Am I cursed? No to the latter. What's happening is that you didn't get enough of the oxidized color out, so the color molecules that are in there have reoxidized again. So that is what is going to happen there. Ideally, 2 rounds of it are good. I've had people, if you feel like in your gut and you have enough experience that she's got a lot of buildup, if you asked her, she was honest, oh, I've used, you know, L'Oreal's Darkest Black 5 times. Typically, you're gonna be doing 2 rounds in that day, and you're not gonna be able to give her something that she's gonna be happy with. So what I always say is you always wanna under-promise and over-deliver. Again, back to that example, that client comes in, box black hair color, she wants to be Marilyn Monroe. That ain't gonna happen. You're gonna be honest. You're gonna under-promise and try to over-deliver. Okay, well, I'll see what I can do. Maybe if you're very lucky, you'll get a lot of that box color out and she will be blonder. And the second remover that I want to talk about, because that was the perm-like one, we covered that the pros is that it's gentle, does not lift natural hair color, great for oxidative color. You can do 2 rounds of it, and you can recolor in the same day. Some of the not so good things about it is the odor. It depends on how much product you have. And the other issue is that if the client has semi-permanent color, it ain't gonna work. So what do you use if you have semi-permanent color? Well, you wanna use the bleach-like one. The bleach-like hair color remover, I showed y'all the Beyond the Zones, L'Oreal's Colors app, which is pretty much just Ethosol in a fancier box. This is the professional one only. Ethosol, I believe, is also professional only as well. They give you powder like this, and they give you the activator, which is 20 volume. My own personal opinion, all of this is a total waste because you can get the same product at CVS for just about the same price. This is actually, I think, a little bit more. It's bleach. Bottom line, I've read the ingredients. You can just get a nice tub of bleach and just mix it accordingly in the same mixing ratio. This is what they call it baby bleach, because what it is they use a very small amount of the bleaching powder and you're using a heavy amount of a 20 volume. And what that does is that lowers the pH a little bit instead of regular bleach, and it tends to foam up a lot. And you can leave this on the hair for about 45 minutes for that box black hair color because it will all lift. So, some of the pros with this. Takes out semi-permanent color, you know, creates that alkaline environment, it completely comes in there and tears everything apart. Some of the downsides of this. It will lift natural hair color. So if you have a client that has only used box black on the rest of her hair color, the rest of her hair, and her roots are natural, and you throw this product on there, you're gonna lift. And I've had people completely throw this all over and apply it sloppily instead of applying to the previously colored area first. That way it can lighten a lot. They get a scary result. They get bleached out roots that are so white, or, you know, a pale yellow or an orange, and the rest of it is this gross red. And that's because you didn't apply it carefully. So it will remove both direct and oxidative. It is more aggressive. You're gonna mix 2 parts of this. The benefit too is you can also mix it with warm water. If you have a client with semi-permanent color, I tell people all the time, instead of mixing it with peroxide 20 volume, just take that bleaching powder, pour some warm water in there. Works just like a charm. It is also foamy, and the other benefit, just like the perm-like one, you can recolor in the same day. So that's another tool you can have in your back bar. My own personal opinion, invest in the perm-like one. The perm-like ones will come in different viscosities. From Kin Cream, one of my favorite ones. You can mix this in a color bottle. It applies a lot more easily. There was another one, a Satin's hair color remover, which does not smell at all until you mix it, and it smells like fruit, rotten eggs. It smells like Fruit Loops, fruit, rotten eggs, and old milk. That's how bad the stench is on that one. But that one's really liquidy, so you gotta be really careful so it doesn't run in their eyes. You want to find a product that has a good viscosity to your liking. Ideally, a slight gel-like one is ideal because you can apply it with the Russian bowl and really apply it in there. When you are using the perm-like one, remember when you're shampooing, because it takes a few shampoos, you want to kind of work it like you're working at a stain. Don't be afraid to leave that shampoo on there for a few minutes because it's very alkaline. While working it, rinse. You're not shampooing the scalp so much as you're trying to shampoo the old color out of the ends. When you're doing the bleach-like one, you're not going to want to do that aggressive shampooing. What you're going to want to do is try to rinse with warm water. Get a nice shampoo in there to shut off the product to make sure none of the bleach is active. And then you're going to want to see where you're at and determine what you can do. You know, the scalp might be a little sensitive, so you don't always want to go and throw a high volume color in there. If the client is able to, like let's say you're doing this at nighttime, have her go home like that, understanding that it's going to look horrible. She's going to come back in the morning and then you can do your color because her scalp has had some time to rest. That's always an option. So those are the two color removing products that exist. You'll find no mention of it in My Lady's textbook. You will find maybe a small mention of it in Pivot Point's textbook. The third option is to use bleach. Okay, pretty self-explanatory like I've explained before. Okay, you can use warm water. Warm water is great for direct dye. Warm water is also really good for, if you just want to bump the shade up or two. I'm gonna get a quick drink of water, but I'll be right back. Okay, so I am back and I just want to finish talking about option number 3 for color correction, and that is using peroxide. Again, with bleach, there is no need to use 30 volume, 40 volume peroxide, an extremely high amount of peroxide. 20 volume works just fine. If the hair is a little compromised, try the warm water. If the client is saying, oh, I have dark brown, but I just want to shift it a shade or two, to bleach and warm water. You can maybe mix in a little shampoo. No more than 5-10 minutes, keep checking it, and when you start to see it lighten a little bit, take it out. That usually does the trick. Option number 4, and this kind of is where it gets tricky when you're talking about color corrections, because we're taught one thing in cosmetology school, and we're taught that hair color does not lift hair color. It can, but it's unpredictable. So for example, some of the lighter shades of hair color have less pigment and there is more of the alkalizer, more ammonia, it's a little bit more stronger. You mix that with the higher volume of peroxide, you're gonna bump a shade or two. Can you do it? Yeah. Should you do it? That's where judgment comes in and experience. High lift is really good for those clients that are maybe at a blonde shade that didn't come out right. You can do some high lift and that will bump it out a little bit. You can also do a few foils of it and it will bump you to that shade that you want to be at. I've done corrections where they're at about a level 9. I'll do some high lift and it will able to bump her up to that nice platinum blonde look without extreme damage of using bleach when bleach is not feasible. As for semi-permanent color, high lift may or may not work. The key is also to be mindful of what base the high lift is. Some high lifts are warm. So again, if you do not want to get warm results, you're not going to want to throw beige or gold high lift blonde on whatever color you're using. There's also high lifts reds and browns, and those may be great if your client wants to go redder or she wants to maybe shift her brown up. Other good thing is because high lift contains more ammonia, you can use your high lift shades and a higher volume of developer to actually change the hair without getting the same damage as bleach. There is still damage, and again, this is not something you want to be reckless with. Typically I've done high lift in double 10 or 20 volume. I've done high lift in 30 and 40 volume sometimes. Depends on what the client wants. Strand test it. If you're using high lift on a darker color, like levels 1 through 5, and that's been a permanent color, I'd be mindful of it. I really wouldn't do it unless they want something that's like a shade, maybe 2 shades lighter, because that's all you're really going to be able to bump out. It's not going to be a product that's going to go in there, lighten and get an even color. So that is just something to be cautious of. You can do a few foils in there. That kind of gives you natural highlights. There's all these options you can use high lift with that I like. And high lift typically has to process a lot longer. It's not the 45 minutes like regular color. It'll be up to an hour and 15, sometimes an hour and 30, something that you want to use judgment with. I've even found that high lift and double 20, if left in the hair long enough, will actually lift the same amount as bleach because it is a little bit stronger. High lift was actually made because when most color lines would make 50, 60, 70, 80 volume, the peroxide would spill, it would cause a chemical burn. So what happened was we had to find something that would work. And we said, okay, we're gonna use a higher amount of ammonia and this will be high lift. So the other option that you have, if you really wanna bump a shade or two, is clear. And I know that confuses a lot of people because clear is actually used to either dilute or it's used alone when you just want to get a base bump. Clear is just ammonia in a tube. So you're gonna have ammonia, you're gonna mix it with peroxide, 10, 20, 30, 40, depends on what you wanna do. Typically I've just done 20 volume and clear, especially after I've used a perm-like color remover. It works like a charm. It's actually a good product because it's a good way to check, and it's a good way to also maybe bump out some residual color that you didn't get out. So I've done that before and the hair was just fine as long as you're conditioning every step. You can foil with it. The key thing too is that you don't want to use ammonia-free clear. I've had people use permanent hair color lines, they use ammonia-free and they keep overlapping it, and that's a great way to get breakage because the MEA or ethanolamine are chemicals that are used in ammonia-free products, and as I've discussed before, in very high amounts they can be just as damaging, and they actually are way more damaging than ammonia because it gets trapped in the hair, it builds up and it reactivates. So what happens is over time you're gonna have hair that's compromised and the hair is gonna potentially melt, and that is not something you want. And choice number 6 in your toolbox, and this is something that everyone has in their toolbox, it's totally free, something that you can't find at any store. Pause this video and guess what it is. Your most important tool in your toolbox that is totally free, saying no and explaining why. No is a 2-letter word, no is a sentence, no means no. If you know for a fact that that hair is gonna melt off. As an experienced professional, if you know that something is not gonna work, if you're a newbie and you're doing a strand test, everyone should do a strand test. You do that strand test and that foil gets very hot after you've clarified and you've demineralized the hair, you felt it and you go, ooh, ow. That's gonna be a no-no. That means that there is something in that hair that she's either lying to you about. You're gonna take that foil and you're gonna show the client, you're gonna show her and say, look ma'am, I'm sorry, but I can't do this because this is what your hair is gonna be like. She gives you a hard time and she freaks out and you all go somewhere else. I'm sorry you feel that way, but I can't do this. If you feel the need to go somewhere else, you can go somewhere else. Because she's gonna find that one hairdresser that is not gonna do that strand test, is gonna put color remover or some kind of product on her hair, and she's gonna have a horrible meltdown, maybe a scalp burn. That's not gonna be on your watch, it's gonna be on their watch. So that is why it's important to get comfortable with saying no and explaining why. No, I can't do the service right now because your hair is compromised, or you had a reaction to this in the foil. Here's what happened. I don't want your hair to melt off. I care about your hair. Here are some options that we can do. We can give you a short haircut. We can work with what you were given. But maybe that idea that you had can't happen today, but I can get you close to. These are all important psychology skills that one has to be mindful of and one has to master in order to successfully navigate this, because I can tell you something. When I started in this field, the first time I had to say no, I felt like my whole chest had to sink. And they were upset about it, but I've also had those that I'll say no and I'll explain why. You're not being mean, you're just being kind. Well, I'm sorry I can't do this because of this reason. They respect that. So now what I want to cover is just some special considerations, and if you think of any other ones, comment down below that I might have missed. Number 1 is henna, which is a vegetable dye. It coats the hair. At best, it will block your entire service. It will block the product, the color remover. It'll block the bleach. It'll block the color. And at worst, if it's black henna, which is tainted with heavy metals, it will react and it will cause hair breakage. Hair will boil, bubble, and smoke, and it can cause a scalp burn. Special consideration number 2, keratin treatment. Know that keratin will fade all hair colors. Also know that if you put color on a keratin, it will break the seal, so you're not going to get as much longer lasting results after it. You can do a deposit only color on a keratin and that will be just fine. It's not going to be as harsh. Number 3 is a perm. If a client has a perm, their hair is already going to be compromised. If they want a color correction, you have to really think really carefully. Okay, maybe I got to do a lower volume. Try to do 10 volume. 10 volume might work like 20 or 30 volume because the hair is porous. There's less of that rough protective cuticle to work with, so the color product isn't go in there. It might come out too dark. Know that perms will make the hair porous, so typically you want to formulate warmer to get a cooler result. So you're not going to over ash the hair or cause the hair to turn a really gross muddy color. If the client is using a thio treatment or a Japanese straightening treatment, there's really not much you can do. Same thing with a client that just does regular thio. Regular thio might be a little bit safer, not as compromised, but Japanese straightening treatments is including a hot iron. there is not much you're going to be able to do, so you want to strand test and explain to the client, okay, the best I can do is maybe do a deposit only color or a semi-permanent color and see what you can do. If the client's already had that and you've done a strand test and on just those areas it's fine, you just want to treat those areas. You don't want to be hitting the virgin hair because it's easier to color and bleach hair that has been treated with a relaxing product like a thio or a relaxer as opposed to hair that has not. And this is where skill and experience comes in. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, don't do it. Number 5, a special consideration is extensions. If the client has extensions in their hair, you need to know, are they real or are they fake? I had a good friend of mine, she recently just got pink hair extensions. She tried to recolor them. Well, hers were fishing line, it was artificial. There is no cuticle in artificial color. It's just printed out a plastic bag or printed out fishing line made from a 3D printer. That's not gonna work with bleach or with color. I've even had some clients use fake extensions. They try to put bleach on it and it actually melts or breaks down the plastic. If their extensions are real, you really gotta be careful because a lot of those extensions, they come from China and they come from India. And even though they're blonde, a lot of those extensions have been treated with either factory chemicals or high volumes of peroxide and heat. And if you go to put bleach on that, it could very well break off. And you could have a client who gets a wonderful, multi-$1,000 installation. She comes in, you put a few foils in those extensions, and all of a sudden the foils are breaking off and her extensions are melted. That hairdresser that did those extensions is not going to do it for free. So what's going to happen is you're going to lose a client and get a bad reputation. So that's something that you want to, have communication with their hairdresser who's been doing their extensions, or what they call a weavologist. So you want to know, are they real or are they fake? What you can and can't use on them. As a rule of thumb, deposit only is the safest way to go with hair extensions, unless the client is buying her own, and in that case, you can customize them for her. Number 6 is a relaxer. So important thing with relaxer is being ethical with it. A relaxer is a very strong product. Same with the Jerry Curl. With a relaxer, it's lye, it's sodium hydroxide. And then you also want to ask the client, well, what kind of relaxer did you use? If it was a single-use one, they said it burned, that's typically a lye relaxer. If they said they had to mix 2 parts, if they show you the photograph with this beautiful model in the background where she's kind of like in a natural area, that's typically a no-lye relaxer or a relaxer that will shut itself off. In which case, either one of those will cause massive damage if you do it wrong. So always strand test and explain to the client, ask for permission, may I strand test because I don't feel comfortable doing this. And if you maybe get a good result, go through with it, but be very careful. Typically when a lanthionine bond is created with a relaxer, it's not going to be compatible with any color service. So with relaxers, I'm old-fashioned. I really don't like to bleach, especially even color them. Semi-permanent color works just fine because that hair is so torn up from that relaxer, you're dealing with high porosity. And number 7 is sun-in. Sun-in is just peroxide. They're spraying it on their hair, and that can degrade hair over time and break their hair down because it is an acid. There's not much you can do with sun-in. Sun-in is not a product I like to work with. If you've seen my previous video, I won't rehash too much, but you'll find out why. If you try to color over sun-in, it'll either block the color or the hair will just break off flat out. Okay, so I went over that, and what I'm gonna do is I have 2 models. This is the best kind of model because if anything bad happens, they don't complain. I have 2 mannequins. One of them has been treated with oxidative hair color. The other one has been treated with direct dye, or what we call semi-permanent hair color. And I'm gonna go and experiment on them. On one side, I'm gonna be doing the perm-like remover. On another side, I'm gonna be doing the bleach-like remover. On the back, I'm gonna try high lift, I'm gonna try clear, and I'm gonna try bleach 20 volume, bleach in warm water, and I'm gonna see the result on both. And we're gonna come back and we're gonna explain why we are seeing what we're seeing. And I think this will be a really good part 1 for this video. So this is our theory, and now it's time for our little experiment. So if you have any mannequins, take a mannequin at home. If you have only one, do one side with semi-permanent color and do the other side with permanent, and go along with me as we do this little journey. And I want everyone to comment on their experience down below of how their experiment came out.